You woke up rich, then went to bed broke. No war, no warning, just a crash that broke the world. Imagine it's 1922. The war's over, the jazz is loud, and everyone's wallet feels infinite. Factories once built tanks, now build toasters and fridges that whisper, ice boxes are for peasants. The skyline of New York rises like it's competing with heaven itself. Steel beams gleaming in the sun. People believe the future only moves in one direction, up, dual. Even economists said, trust me, this decade is absolutely roaring. Henry Ford's moving belt turns a 12-hour job into 90 minutes. Cars flood the streets like rolling dreams. Oil, steel, rubber, every linked industry explodes with demand, feeding an endless optimism. Radios enter 10 million homes by 1929, spreading jazz, news, and commercials for more things to buy. But behind the music, rural America can't even get on the dance floor. Farmers once rich from wartime demand now face plummeting prices and desperate loans. They buy new tractors hoping to survive, but instead they just go broke faster. In cities, people discover a new national hobby, buying stuff they can't afford. Welcome to the magic of buy now, pay later. Radios, cars, furniture, all financed with borrowed hope. Banks love it. Why not lend to everyone? And they said, what could go wrong? Wall Street becomes Disneyland for adults, where fortunes rise faster than roller coasters. Margin loans let anyone buy $100 in stock with just $10 down. Easy, right? The remaining $90. Who cares? Stocks only go up, everyone laughs. Even barbers, butchers, and bellboys give stock tips like profits of profit. A bellboy tells a millionaire to sell railroads and go all in on pencils. Between 1924 and 1929, the Dow quadruples. Everyone's convinced the party never ends. Companies invent holding companies that own other holding companies. Layers of nothing stacked on hype. Some warn a crash is coming, but the jazz is too loud to hear them. Economist Roger Babson shouts, a crash is coming, and Wall Street replies, go touch grass. The band plays louder, dollar bills rain like confetti, and greed becomes the national anthem. Mike says, when everyone thinks they're smarter than the market, the fall is already on its way. October 29th, 1929, America woke up rich and went to bed broke. Black Tuesday, the day the stock market performed a perfect 10-meter dive into concrete. The Dow plummets, ticker tapes spit red numbers, and chaos fills the air. One trader collapses, recovers, sees his portfolio, and collapses again. $14 billion vanished in a day, $200 billion in today's money, gone. Real homes, college funds, and dreams disappeared into thin air. Outside the stock exchange, crowds gather in silence, eyes empty, hands trembling. The roaring 20s didn't end. They crashed into a brick wall at full speed. The dominoes start falling, first the investors, then the banks, then everyone else. During the boom, people bought stocks with borrowed money, $10 down, $90 owed. When the market tanked, brokers demanded the rest, immediately. Paper fortunes turned to ash. Monday's millionaires became Thursday's beggars. Bankers who toasted champagne now stare at balance sheets like tombstones. And the banks, those temples of marble and trust, begin to collapse. People rush to withdraw savings, pounding on locked doors in panic. Tellers shout, your money is safe. But even they don't believe it. Entire families lose everything: savings, bonds, homes, hope. Little Timmy's piggy bank remains full. He's now the richest in the house. The panic spreads overseas. U.S. banks call in foreign loans, pulling the rug from Europe. Germany's fragile recovery crumbles. Britain staggers, trade cuts in half. Newspapers insist. Market adjusts as investors take profits, next to photos of men pawning rings. Politicians claim the worst is over as soup lines form outside their speeches. President Hoover calmly assures the economy is fundamentally sound. Millions listen from empty dinner tables, asking which part of that sentence helps. Factories go silent. The hum of industry turns into the sound of hunger. Unemployment hits 25%. 1 in 4 Americans can't find work. Detroit's auto plants shut down. Production drops by 75%. Men stand outside factory gates, holding lunch pails filled with nothing but hope. Bread lines snake through city blocks. Mothers trade sleep for soup. Children faint in class, not from boredom, but from hunger. America isn't starving metaphorically, it's starving literally. Banks fail, dignity thins, suicides soar. Newspapers can't keep up with obituaries. Behind every statistic is a name. Behind every name, a broken promise. Birth rates fall, marriages collapse. The future itself becomes a luxury. Then the sky turns black. Dust storms rise from the plains like angry ghosts. Crops die, livestock suffocate, homes fill with choking dirt. Families pack up in old cars, chasing rumors of jobs to the west. Their signs read California or bust. For most, it's just bust. Mike says, this wasn't just a drought, it was the price of greed. Farming beyond the land's limits. In Washington, Hoover builds dams but refuses large-scale aid. He calls it un-American. The people call it too late. Shanty towns rise, Hoovervilles. Newspapers become Hoover blankets. People laugh bitterly, but mostly to keep from crying. Summer 1932. Thousands of WWI veterans march to Washington for their promised bonuses. Congress says no. Hoover says no. Then the army comes. Tear gas fills the air, tents burn, and veterans run carrying their children. Mike whispers, that day America didn't just lose money, it lost its reflection. Anger spreads, radical rallies rise, bank robbers become folk heroes. People don't cheer crime, they cheer rebellion against betrayal. Amidst all this, something fragile remains, endurance. People migrate, stand in lines, hold families close, and simply survive. Not out of hope, but because they had no other choice. By 1933, a new voice breaks the silence. Franklin D. Roosevelt takes the podium. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself, he declares. Radios crackle in every home. People listen, not just to words, but to courage. It's the first deep breath the nation has taken in years. FDR launches the New Deal. A plan not to save money, but to save people. Young men with nothing are handed shovels and told, you're here to save the country. The Civilian Conservation Corps plants trees, builds trails, restores dignity. The Works Progress Administration builds bridges, schools, and hope. The Tennessee Valley Authority lights up towns that had lived in darkness. Families gather around radios, not because they bought them, but because they now have power. Slowly, the dust settles. Factories hum again. GDP rises. FDR builds safety nets. The SEC, the FDIC, Social Security. Banks reopen. People deposit money instead of running to withdraw it. Social Security tells a generation, you matter, we'll remember you. Even artists get jobs, photographers, writers, painters capturing a nation healing. Dorothea Lange's migrant mother becomes the face of endurance. Her eyes don't say we're saved, they say we're surviving. Hollywood joins the recovery. The Wizard of Oz turns gray into color. People laugh again. Swing music fills restaurants. Cities glow. Mike smiles. If you squint, the skyline looks like it's rising again. But this time, the hum of factories carries a different sound. Preparation. Helmets, boots, ammunition. America is stirring again, this time for something larger. The Great Depression didn't end with a celebration. It ended with work. With tired backs, blistered hands, and a nation learning to stand again. Mike closes. When the world collapses, rebuild anyway. That's the only real wealth left. Mike says, history doesn't just repeat. It rehearses with new costumes and the same human mistakes. Look around today. Debt still fuels dreams. Markets rise on optimism, not always on reason. Buy now, pay later is back. Only this time it fits in your pocket with one tap. Every generation believes they're smarter than the last until the graph stops going up. The Great Depression was a reminder that growth without grounding is just gravity waiting. But what's remarkable isn't how America fell. It's how it stood back up. FDR didn't promise miracles. He promised movement. And that movement became hope. Mike recalls, my grandfather said he found dignity not in a paycheck, but in purpose. The New Deal wasn't about money. It was about belonging again. The same hands that once begged for bread were now building bridges. Those bridges didn't just cross rivers. They crossed despair. Artists painted, writers chronicled, musicians sang, because healing is also art. Dorothea Lange captured sorrow, but also strength in the eyes of the forgotten. The world saw not victims, but survivors, and that changed everything. Recovery wasn't fast. It took sweat, stubbornness, and a belief that tomorrow mattered. That's what the Depression taught. When systems collapse, community rebuilds. When money disappears, meaning takes its place, if people let it. Mike pauses. Maybe that's why they called it the Great Depression. It wasn't just economic. It was human. And what we rebuilt wasn't just GDP, it was faith. Today, we scroll past headlines of crashes and layoffs, but the core lesson remains. Prosperity is fragile, but resilience, that's built into the human blueprint. You can lose your job, your savings, even your home, but not your capacity to rebuild. The men who once fainted from hunger raised skyscrapers again. The women who rationed bread became teachers, leaders, voices of change. Every hardship planted a seed for the future America would grow into. The Social Security check in your mailbox, it was born from those dust storms. Safety net beneath you, sewn by hands that knew what it meant to fall. Mike looked straight at the camera. We forget too easily that safety costs suffering. Someone before us always paid the down payment for our stability. The New Deal didn't fix everything, but it built a foundation no panic could fully erase. Decades later, every time the market trembles, those rules still whisper, "We've been here before." So what should we remember from 1929? That euphoria and ignorance are siblings. That greed wears optimism's mask, and that wisdom is born only from losing. Mike laughed softly. Back then, everyone thought they were the main character. Sound familiar? The Depression ended with tired hands and a country learning humility. The next global storm was already forming, World War II, but this time, America was ready. The factories that had gone silent roared back to life, forging steel and destiny. A tenor, the same generation that lost everything, built the arsenal that saved democracy. Because pain, when remembered, becomes power. Mike stands in front of a New York skyline, the same city that once fell hardest. The Depression didn't just change the economy, it changed the soul of a nation. And maybe that's the real recovery story, one you can't measure in charts. You measure it in courage, in neighbors helping neighbors, in hands that keep working. History books call it the Great Depression. But maybe it was the great lesson. That wealth isn't the opposite of poverty, it's the opposite of despair. That when the music stops, what's left is who we are, not what we own. The factories, the banks, the numbers. They were never the real story. The real story is the people who refuse to stay broken. Mike's voice softens. My grandfather said he never wanted to be rich again, just never hungry. And somehow that made him richer than ever. The Great Depression reminds us that progress isn't guaranteed. It's earned, rebuilt, and relearned. The more we study those years, the more we realize they weren't about money. They were about meaning. A decade of hunger built a century of understanding. America didn't just survive, it evolved. From greed to gratitude, from panic to purpose. That's not just history, it's a mirror. Every time we look away from that mirror, we start repeating the same mistakes. Maybe that's why we keep telling this story, so we don't forget how fragile comfort is. So we remember that bubbles pop, economies crash, but humanity endures. Mike turns, walking through a museum exhibit of Depression photos. Each image is pain frozen in time, but also proof of survival. He stops at Dorothea Lange's migrant mother. She's not looking at the camera, Mike says. She's looking at tomorrow. And that's what recovery looks like. Fear that doesn't stop you. The lights dim, a faint jazz melody plays. The 1920s began with jazz, and so did the recovery. Different songs, same soul. Mike smiles, because even in despair, America finds rhythm. The Depression didn't end with applause. It ended with work, patience, and a quiet kind of pride. The same pride that builds bridges, feeds neighbors, and keeps showing up. That's how you rebuild a country, not with gold, but with grit. Mike stands beside a bridge built in the 1930s, cars passing behind him. Every beam here is a reminder. Progress was paid for in sweat. He looks down at his hands. They built so we could rest. And now it's our turn to remember and to build again. Today's challenges, recessions, inflation, inequality, may look different but rhyme the same. The question is, will we repeat history or rewrite it? Will we panic or will we plant something new? Because even in chaos, there's always a seed waiting to grow. Mike says resilience isn't a policy, it's a decision. And every generation must make it again. He glances toward the horizon, sunlight breaking through clouds. The Great Depression was America's darkest hour, but also its most defining. It proved we could lose everything and still find ourselves. That's why the story matters. Not as a warning, but as a blueprint. Because somewhere, someone right now is living their own depression. And they need to know, this too can end if you don't give up. A soft montage plays. Workers, farmers, teachers, builders, modern and old blended together. Different tools, same spirit, Mike narrates. History moves forward, but strength always looks the same. Hands, grit, hope. The jazz fades into silence, replaced by a slow heartbeat rhythm. That's the sound of recovery, not music, not applause, just heartbeat. Mike walks off camera, leaving only the empty skyline behind. Text appears. In every collapse, there's a beginning. The Great Depression didn't destroy America. It defined it. And what defines us most isn't what we lose. It's what we rebuild. Mike's voice returns one last time. When everything falls apart, start with one brick. Gee, build again. Believe again. That's how every comeback begins. The music swells. A gentle jazz reprise from the opening. Archival photos fade into colorized modern scenes of workers and families. The message, the story of recovery never ends. It only changes faces. Mike reappears briefly, smiling. If this story moved you, share it. Because remembering history is how we stop repeating it. And maybe how we save ourselves. He points to the camera gently. Wherever you are, keep building. Because hope, like the economy, only grows when you invest in it. Mike chuckles softly. And trust me, that's the best return you'll ever get. Fade to black. The sound of typewriters clicking in rhythm with jazz drums. On screen, the Great Depression, explained, remembered, rebuilt. Final whisper, history repeats, but so does resilience. End screen, subscribe for more stories that make sense of the chaos. Jazz fades completely, silence lingers for 2 seconds. Tomorrow, text fades in. Dedicated to everyone who kept believing when the lights went out. Background fades to gold light over the horizon. Subtle heartbeat sound returns, steady, alive, human. Mike's voice almost a whisper. The future always starts in the ruins. Fade out completely. End